Ray, good to see you and welcome to How and What. And I've got some questions for you. Ray, when fear or insecurities rise in your life, how do you personally walk through it? What helps you to stay anchored in God's peace during those moments?
I mean, it says in Isaiah, doesn't it, about you will keep him in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on you because he trusts in you. Trust in the Lord forever, for Yah, the Lord, is everlasting strength. When I stay focused and aligned with him, you learn that he will direct your paths, you know? I mean, it's like when Jesus, you had some very experienced fishermen and Jesus was in the boat and the storm came up, didn't it? And they're all thinking we're dead because they know the waters. And there's Jesus sound asleep at the end of the bed, end of the boat. And they're saying, Lord, don't you care? To which basically, he looks at them, he rebuked the storm, and then he went back to bed. Because Jesus knew his destiny was not to drown in the sea. Right? He knew where he was going. He knew in the end he was going to go to the cross and then be back with the Father as well. So this whole thing about being at perfect peace in God, if I allow his peace to reign in me, that means that I am staying focused upon what he is saying, not no matter what the circumstances might be. And we've all had those times when we find ourselves troubled, and there could be all sorts of things. Everything from someone might be nasty to you, or your circumstances aren't working out as you thought they would work out. But somehow or the other, when you're in God, it doesn't matter what the storm is, you are keeping in that place of perfect peace because you're staying focused upon him. You're seeing beyond what is going on at that moment in time there. So, that's how things like fear and insecurities are overcome, is I understand, one, who I am in God. Secondly, I'm maintaining that close walk with him, because he says, he's going to direct my paths as well.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Ray. It really is there. And I really like that because that's a great scripture from Isaiah that you read about perfect peace and our mind focused on the Lord. And it's looking to the Lord, isn't it, really? Keeping our eyes fixed on him.
Yeah, it's about, in the end, something other people don't know. It's, because you know him, don't you?
Yeah, yeah, that's
It's what,
right. So, Ray, how can I cultivate compassion and empathy towards others?
Right. Well, there's a couple of things I think, we can focus on that. First of all, it has to do with things like engagement, you know, um, keeping your eyes open, what is going on round about you. Um, in John 5, we have the story of the guy, the cripple by the well, and who couldn't get into the water when the water stirred, and then Jesus shows up, doesn't he? And there, but it's interesting because it says in chapter in 5 verse 6, it says Jesus saw him laying there. Jesus noticed him. How many hundreds of people were hanging around that pool waiting to get into the water when the waters were stirred? But Jesus saw him. All right, Jesus noticed him. So sometimes we need to know, we need to keep our eyes open there. We're saying, we need to notice things as well, and reaching out to him. And it's focus on him again, because it talks about, doesn't it, in Psalm 68, he is the father of the fatherless, the defender of the widows, is God in his holy habitation. And God sets the solitary in families. I mean, we have an epidemic in Britain of loneliness. The amount of people that they are lonely. They might know a lot of people, but they're lonely. They don't have a closeness and family. Missing a family kind of dynamic. Because he says he will bring those who are bound into prosperity, but the rebellious dwell in a dry land. That's there. So there is this whole arena of engagement, keeping my eyes open and staying focused. Otherwise you can you end up just looking at this, that, and the other, don't you? You can find yourself, it's like the latest shiny thing that comes around, or the latest bit of glamour. And I thank God when God moves, all right. And we're seeing God move around the world and do things, but I do worry where it's like you get people who seem to what do we used to call them? We used to call them blessing hoppers, you know. I'm going over that bit of blessing, or I'm going there for that bit of blessing. Well, sometimes, the actual, he wants you to be the blessing rather than you go and get the blessing. It's, as well. Compassion and empathy towards others is, I need to stay engaged. So one, I'm engaged with him, so I see how he sees things, because otherwise I will start seeing them in a completely different way, which is not always a godly way, you know.
Yeah, that's good practical advice there, seeing things how the Lord sees
Yeah.
things. Ray, you've been a minister and you still minister, and you're a blessing to us on Living Stones. You must have come across a lot of people who feel loneliness. And like you say, a person can be in a crowd with lots of people around them, yet they still feel lonely. How do you think someone can be helped like that? How can they combat that loneliness, would you say?
Yeah, well, like I said, about engaging with others, and particularly with engaging with him. That when I start to, particularly when I really do start to engage in these arenas, and experiencing what he's saying with these things, but also sometimes people who are in these positions, they have a history as well. That there are things which have gone on in the past, which was not necessarily their own fault, but usually it is their own fault, of what's happened. It's things like recognizing when you got it wrong, and putting it right, as well, and being open enough at times, not just to say sorry, but also turn around saying things like, I was wrong, will you forgive me, please? Because this whole arena of forgiveness is such a huge issue, that we're moving around in these things, and that I'm learning all the time, from him, and drawing near to him. So I'm cultivating that kind of relationship that's there. So.
Yeah, you mentioned forgiveness there, Ray. How do you handle forgiveness and reconciliation in relationships?
Right. Well, there's a couple of things in that. First of all, we have to learn how not only to grant forgiveness, but also how to receive it.
Yes.
You know, um, that that I am willing. In the end, we have to learn from our mistakes, which we make, and we all make them.
Yeah.
Some seem to do it more spectacular than others, but we all make them, as well. But granting forgiveness, and to me, forgiveness is not an action of the emotion; it's an action of the will. You know, I mean, God grants us forgiveness not as an action of his emotion, but an action of his will. He says, because we say, he says, I will forgive you. And you see, constantly Jesus was moving in that kind of thing, as well, but also learning how to this area of restoration. All right. Zacchaeus is an interesting one. All right, because he was a tax collector, so he certainly wasn't the flavour of the day. Tax collectors weren't particularly popular then; they're not particularly popular now, are they? But and certainly since that the money was going off to the dreaded Romans, there. But when he was confronted with Jesus, he turned around and said, Lord, look, I give half of my money to the poor, and if I've taken anything from anyone by false accusation, I restore it fourfold. So there's this arena of that sometimes we need to bring about restoration. And I'm not into this thing about, countries sort of dishing out billions and all the rest of it. that's there. But certainly, if I'm willing to restore stuff to people, I mean, before I become a Christian, yeah, I mean, part of my testimony, you know, I, I used to break into people's houses, you know, but when I become a Christian, I actually found myself taking some of this stuff back to these people, you know, some stuff I couldn't take back because I'd sold it, but yes, and stuff like that. I can always remember, I mean, bless him, Brian Richardson. Do you know him? Your former pastor at Barking, you know. I remember going to the Isle of Wight youth camp down there, and it's a wonder I didn't get chucked out of there as well. But we at night we was always getting out at the campsite at night, and we used to get a bit upset because the local boys' brigade used to blow their bugles at 6 in the morning, waking us all up. And so sometimes we would get out at night, and they used to hang their bugles on their flagpoles. So we managed to get into a couple of camps, and basically, from our position, we moved the bugles to a less noisy position. We nicked them, yes, but we also swiped one of the flagpoles. And do you remember the duck pond, which was down at the bottom? Which was about 3 inches of water and about 6 foot of mud, in it.
Yeah.
And I can remember at 2 in the morning we were pitching some of these flagpoles in this pond. And Brian came round in his van, which he had his minibus. And this is about 2 in the morning. Now, I'm in the pond, right, with a flagpole in my hand, bang to rights with the headlights bang on me. And Brian got out and said, "What you doing in there?" To which I just went, quack, 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 quack. He said, "Well, if you're a duck, you won't need these," and took me shoes and drove off. Now, we had to walk back up to the camp there. Now, that very next morning, God spoke to me and said, "That wasn't yours." So I remember carrying this flagpole all the way over to this other camp with, I mean, these things weren't exactly small. And to give it back and apologizing to them. And one of the leaders looked at us. He said, we had actually hired that, and we were wondering how we were going to give it, what we were going to say. Thank you, because I said to him, God spoke to me and I was wrong what I did. And I'm restoring this to you that's there, which they were very thankful. They're there. They still blew their bugles at 6 in the morning, but there. But being willing at times to also to restore. So this whole forgiveness and reconciliation, sometimes we miss this point about bringing restoration as well. Even things like, I know couples where things aren't always going well in a marriage and they both hold out on each other, and some things need to be restored, even in relationships there, the husband being willing to say I was wrong just as much as the wife at times,
Yeah.
there. I remember talking to one woman once, and she knew that he preferred coffee to tea, but every time, when she got annoyed with him, she would only ever give him cups of tea, you see, and that is what she was doing. It was annoying him. And she felt God speak to her one day, go and buy a coffee pot. And so she went and bought a coffee pot. When the husband came home, he started crying because he realized God had done something.
Yes.
It's little things. If you get the little things right, the big things don't become issues because they don't get to the big things.
Yeah, there's some really good points there, actually, Ray. I like your analogy there. And that leads me on really nicely to what lessons can be learned from past mistakes.
Right. Well, we could be here all day with this one, can't we? First of all, be humble enough to realise that there's been a mistake in the first place. This arena of humility that, look, I did get it wrong. We don't always get things right. Some things are spectacular. They stand out like a sore thumb, don't they? I can remember when I was an apprentice on the railway, they left me in charge to reconnect some traction motors. These things weighed about 4 or 5 tons apiece, and I didn't connect it up properly, you see. So when we went for power, there was this big blue bang from underneath the train. There was molten copper rolling into the pit, and someone looked at me and they said, "You made a mistake." Well, I couldn't really deny it, could I? And also being humble enough to turn around and say, "Yeah, well, I got it wrong," because if not, we just get, well, I know it all, there. Secondly, to identify what the mistake is, identifying it. Basically, the mistake was that I had connected up wrong, and I was stupid enough to think that I knew it all on that one. Thirdly, to recognize what led up to that mistake. What got me to that place. I was recently in court, not in the dock. I was up there with someone, and they were saying, they got caught doing, was it 110 mile an hour on the M4. They only passed their test less than a year ago. So he like most people, we think we're invincible, don't we? But when I sat down and started talking to him about what led you to that, and basically he was showing off. He had some friends in the car. And so what led you to that? Well, my friends were egging me on. What made you think that this was actually a good idea there? So he had to recognize, one, that he was seeking other people's approval for what he was doing. So he started to recognize what led up to that mistake. And there's other mistakes, like people make financial mistakes. Now, we all do that. We all end up spending money we probably shouldn't have spent there. But it's usually because there's something in us driving. Money, very quickly, money is an expression of life. You trade in X number of hours to get X number of pounds or whatever currency you're working in. And so it's an expression of life. And if you end up with debt beyond what is, there, it becomes a lordship issue. So what is the mistake that led you to do that? What was the drive there? Was the full thing, put in place things which prevent you from starting the process which led you there in the first place. Bible talks about he puts his hedge around about us, doesn't he? What's the saying? It's better the fence at the top of the cliff than an ambulance at the bottom. That you see signs, don't you? That says, don't do this. Probably because someone knows something you don't. There. There's the talk about a farmer once who put a sign out. He got fed up with people crossing his field, and he had a bull in the field. So he put a sign up that said, if you want to cross this field, you've got to do it in under 10 seconds because the bull can do it in 11 seconds. Yes. It's recognizing what got you to that place in the first place. How did it get there? And also the true repentance, that I don't repeat it, that I turn around. I mean, the psalmist, David in Psalm 51, then he cried out, then he have mercy on me, O God. Have mercy according to your loving kindness, according to the multitudes of your tender mercies. Blot out my transgression. Let's get this washed away. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. And then he says, for I acknowledge my transgressions. So he's owning up, isn't he? Yes. And my sin is always before me. So he knew before he even got to the place where the fall took place. Against you and you only have I sinned. Now, I might take that out on someone else, but actually, ultimately, sin is against God there. And done what is evil in your sight, that you may be found just when you speak and blameless when you judge. That I can't stand there and have an argument with God. We all have arguments with God. I have arguments with God. I don't know why I argue, because I know I'm not going to win. but sometimes you feel like you're going to have a go anyway there. So they're the lessons. If you start putting these things in place, then you find yourself not repeating that problem.
Yeah, and I think there, Ray, I like what you said there, breaking it down about the identity and the mistake and recognizing it. That leads also to repentance, because we need to turn our back on those past mistakes and learn from it. So, Ray, what is the role of prayer in your life?
Well, in the end, all right, we have to turn around and say it is pivotal. All right, it is pivotal there. But also I'm learning it's not just about seeking for needs. it's very easy, isn't it? It's like, you go to prayer and it's like you show up with a shopping list. Oh God, I need this. Oh God, I need that, and the rest of it. Now, don't get me wrong. Our God does supply our needs, and we do need to ask. But I also about listening. I'm not just hearing; I'm listening as well. Again, going back to my days on the railway, I got to a point where I could walk up to a train and just by listening to it, I could tell you what was wrong with it. You could hear, but your listening is also having understanding in things as well. So because Jesus said, didn't he? He said, "He who has ears, let him hear." Am I willing to listen? So in prayer, I'm not just coming and bringing my list, not just coming, prayer, supplication, all the rest of it. But sometimes I'm just sitting there and keeping my mouth shut and listening to what he's saying. As you can probably tell, I mean, I if there was an Olympic sport in talking, I'd probably get the gold medal. Yes.
But I think you're right there. I mean, it is a two-way conversation with the Lord as well. So, Ray, lastly, what Bible verse has spoken to you throughout this past week?
Right. Well, there's actually there's two areas. There's two which stood out to us. And it talks about in Exodus 27, "And you shall command the children of Israel that they bring you pure oil of pressed olives for the light, to cause the lamp to burn continuously." All right, that I have to stay in a place of which the oil will burn continuously there, because in the temple there was the lights, wasn't there? There, and it had to burn all the time for them. And also in Isaiah 62, he talks about he set us as watchmen over Jerusalem. And he says, "They shall never hold their peace day or night. You who make mention of the Lord, do not keep silent, and give him no rest till he establishes and he makes Jerusalem a praise in the earth." Basically, that is saying to me, when it comes to my approach with God and that, as a watchman, be a pest. Yes, just keep on and on and on. Jesus talked about the widow, didn't he? Who hadn't been treated properly, but she kept on and on and on. And this whole thing about things like reminding God of the things he said, he doesn't need reminding, all right? But we bring it before him that I am in that place, as I said in Exodus, where it talks about the pure oil which kept the light burning, but also in prayer that I'm just going to stay at it until I get an answer, that ragged determination in that.
Yeah, Ray, I want to say thank you, because you have given us today a lot to reflect on. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you for having us. God bless you.